Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com.
Stephen Quayle is a nationally known radio host, survived to thrive. He's been a guest on Coast to Coast numerous times. He's a photographer and an author of a number of important books, including Breathe No Evil, a primer for understanding bioterrorism, first published in 1996. But additionally, he's also authored Angel Wars. Humanity hangs in the balance with secret powerful forces aligned against it. Giants, master builders of prehistoric and ancient civilizations. Long Walkers, the return of the Nephilim. Blueprint for survival. Investment perspectives on precious metals. And that's why he's here with us on Coast to Coast tonight to talk about the yellow metal. Steve Quayle, I've been wanting to talk to you for a very long time, and I'm thrilled to have you aboard. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. And, Richard, it's about time that you and I got together. We've both been on radio for a number of years, and it's an important subject to talk about because as we're going to the air this morning, I guess it's now officially Sunday, the thing that's troubling most of the financial markets is absolute manipulation. I think it was Rob Kirby that made the statement on King World News last week that there are no longer any markets, real markets left, just intervention. I'll make that real simple, manipulation. And we're talking tonight about where gold is headed, but why it's so important. And I heard your, introduction about Fort Knox. You would think that it would be a simple thing to prove we had what we say we have. It's my contention, has been for the last 15 to 20 years I've been on talk radio, that even during the years when China was just in its build-up phase and Russia was coming out of the Cold War, that they were both going to acquire as much gold as possible because at some point they wanted to leave the American dollar. And the American dollar now is held in great contempt, even though it's going to go higher. The dollar index is going to rise because people still see that we may be a basket case, but there are other countries worse off than we are.
It's the best house in a bad neighborhood. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Excuse me, Stephen, but why are people so passionate about gold? For example, leading into the show, before we even went to air, I was getting emails and tweets saying, "Oh, here we go, you crazy gold bugs." Nothing these days engenders such passion on either side of the issue about holding gold. If you're a gold bug, you can be subjected to a great deal of derision and ridicule by those who hate the yellow metal. What's this all about?
Well, those who hate the yellow metal have made their livelihood out of skinning cats called dumb investors, okay? For instance, I coined a term years ago. You probably heard it used numerous times, but if you can't touch it, you don't own it. Even Gerald Celente found that out when MF Global went down and, spoke quite openly about it. The point is from the beginning of time, gold and silver have been legal tender. The point is that it engenders so much ridicule, mostly by the mainstream media, or what I would call the mainstream madness crew, because what it provides is it provides a foundation, and it also provides basically some tying of your currency, that paper money, to something that is backing it up. Right now, we don't have anything backing up the money that the United States prints and prints and prints and prints. The rest of the world is saying, we don't want your dollars. Obviously, China, when Geithner went to China years ago, do you remember when he made the statement that your money's safe with us, and the people that he was talking to, the Chinese just basically laughed him off stage? Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
And I think that what people have got to understand is there's a difference between a liability and an asset. And tonight I think we're going to get into everything from derivatives, but the bottom line is it's emotional because people don't like to admit that they've been snookered. Imagine I said to you, Richard, give me all your money, and I'm going to give you 5% a month. And you'd say, you got it, Steve. And then find out that I've just taken off to the Caribbean, and I'm living, in the lap of luxury, and you try and track me down, and I'm in a country that has no extradition. Well, it's the same principle. The bottom line is when central banks can print and print and print money, they obviously don't have the discipline to back it up. Having said that, if you even look at China, China considers its gold holdings to be a matter of not only top secrecy, but also a strategic weapon against the West. If everybody will remember, China was built up dramatically by their cheap labor and exporting their products to the United States, with the United States gobbled up. Well, the Chinese have been around the gold market for almost 4,000 years. And most people don't understand that going back to the very first named dynasty, 2000 BC, the fact is that gold was always an important medium of barter and trade. The Romans, obviously, the Greeks, the Babylonians, I'm going a little bit backwards, but the point being is that when you don't have to have the discipline of tying the amount of money to a given amount of gold that underpins that money, you can print. And that's what's happened. That's why you've seen the charts, $1913 being worth $1. Right now it's worth 4 cents. So that's a great deal of currency devaluation. And we've heard even in the first couple of years of the president's presidency that they wanted to kill the dollar. Well, the point is now the rest of the world is saying we don't want your dollar. That's why the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, are saying we're going to set up our own international funds transfer, and now we've got nations trading commodities between themselves, and the yuan is going to be the ultimate currency in the world, and if Russia joins with it, and I can see that, a joint currency. Now, when I said that years ago, Richard, like again, 15 years ago, people thought, I was on the moon and basically broadcasting from some lunar crater. But the point is it engenders a lot of passion, obviously a lot of ridicule and mocking, but the point is that gold has been the only foundation, and gold and silver, that people can build on, that is a real asset. It's withstood the test of time. Obviously,
why is that? Why is that, Steve? What is the allure of gold? I mean, I know it's rare. I've read that there has only been enough gold mined to fill about 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's it.
Right.
So aside from it being rare, and it has some industrial uses, not like silver, but why gold? Why wasn't it diamonds that we backed the dollar with? Or why wasn't it, I don't know, pick your metal. Why gold?
Well, gold is pretty interesting because gold, and you look at, and I'm just saying this, in antiquity, even all the amount of gold that's mined, the kingdoms have fought over gold, still will fight over gold, and basically the country with the most gold not only wins but has won. For instance, in Roman times, the price of gold to silver was a ratio of 12 to 1, okay? So the point is right now, today, we've got the ratio being approximately 60 to 1. So the point that people have got to recognize is the fact that gold is tangible. It's the only asset that isn't pledged 14 times or 140 times. The word derivative, and let me explain derivatives. Can I do it? Because it'll directly...
It's essential. Absolutely. It's essential. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Imagine that you take a pile of horse manure and you put it in a pretty box, okay? And then in the pretty box, you wrap it with pretty paper. Then after you've got the pretty paper on the pretty box, you put a pretty ribbon on the pretty paper that's on the pretty box. And then on top of the ribbon, you add some chocolates and some whistles, and you sell each level of that box, the pretty box, which is only holding horse manure, all over the world. And at the time people say, I want to look in the box, they find out they've been given horse manure just packaged in pretty wrapping paper with bells and whistles on it. Now, that may be a little crass for some people, but if you look at value, value means what is something really worth in the international marketplace. For the first time, I think in, a number of years, almost a dozen years, 1 ounce of gold is now worth, I think, 24 barrels of oil. So we're seeing a commodity-based trading platform arising in the world, and people are basically recognizing that the United States has basically exported and I'm saying this, a depreciating asset to them for their commodities, whether it's oil, whether it's minerals, whether it's food. It doesn't matter. You name it, and they're getting tired of it because the idea is that currency is supposed to be a store of value. When currency comes to the point, there is no store of value. So let me just give you a good example of why this is really, really an emotional issue. Probably at this point, less than 1% of the population owns either gold or silver.
Certainly in the West, yes, certainly in the West.
Yeah, in the West, I'm sorry. I'm talking now specifically about the United States. The rest of the world, almost half the world's population, pretty close to half, is between India and China. I just did the quick math before we came on the air, and you're talking about, almost 2.6 billion people who are buying all the gold and all the silver they can get their hands on. Having said that, it's been stated in history that gold always moves from weak hands to strong arms. Well, value is what people want. Value is what people trade for. And what's fascinating to me is that there's a disconnect. Just as virtual worlds exist, and a lot of people who live in a virtual world can't relate to the real world anymore. Obviously we've got all kinds of new maladies and issues with mind, people just basically escaping reality. I think that's what the central bankers have done. They've issued paper and ended up with everybody's stuff. When you take in the derivatives of being $1.5 quadrillion, Richard, it's really hard to get people to understand what a quadrillion is. It's 1,000 billion. And the thing is that that's how much debt there is. So jumping fast forward, what would you say if someone told you that in a certain point in the future that all IRAs, KEOs, 401ks, and everything was going to be taken by the government to cover our debt? And let's just say this, at close to, maybe $100 million off, but it's about $18 trillion in private pension funds, savings, and all that stuff. And guess what? That just happens to be our national debt. That's what they admit to. It's much higher than that. I submit that all of the assets of the United States and its people in those funds have already been pledged to others. So
I look around the country, around the world, and even here in Canada, there was a bill passed, and you had to sort of dig down deep, like on page 36, and there was a bail-in provision that if the impossible happened, and we have pretty stable banks up here in Canada, but if one of these banks were to fail, there are bail-in provisions. If people recall what happened in Cyprus not too long ago, where people would lose their deposits. Now, instead of becoming a depositor, we are an investor in the bank, and we would lose our money.
Right. We've moved from a secured creditor to an unsecured creditor. That's a big deal. What you just said is the equivalent of an atomic bomb going off in the financial community, at least of North America, especially in Canada and the United States. In essence, our money becomes the banks, and we become the unsecured creditors holding IOUs or promises to pay. And this is really important for people to understand. The point being is that with the new laws in place, they have the right, and it's not just it's Canada, it's Poland, it's New Zealand, it's the United States now. But if there's 100, let's just take it a real simple example. If there's 100 people with $1 million each and let's just call it Bank A, and Bank A has $100 million loss, Bank A can take that $100 million of the depositor's money because remember now, they're an unsecured creditor. In essence, then the bank issues an IOU or stock in the bank. Well, that's kind of like giving you a first-class cabin on the Titanic. It really doesn't mean much when the ship's going down.
Why maybe I can get you to give us a very brief history lesson, why the United States closed the window on gold. In other words, first Roosevelt, it was done in stages, and then finally with Nixon, unhinged the U.S. dollar from gold. It was no longer backed by gold. Why did they do that, and how did it happen?
Well, it happened because the nations that were trading with us were demanding gold at the gold window. And obviously, when you're in the government and you need to buy influence, you need to buy war materials, the more money you have, seemingly, the better off your country will be. We didn't have enough gold to cover all the calls. And by the way, the official, and this is open to debate, but the official holdings of the United States are listed at 8,133 tons, okay? Well, an amazing. Did you see the story that was put out that Alistair McLeod of goldismoney.com says that he can show that the Chinese have somewhere around 25,000 tons of gold. Did you see that?
I did, because and this can be traced. This gold is being melted down in places like Switzerland, restamped, and so we can track this gold moving east.
Right. And I did some quick numbers. Now, this is what you're going to find interesting, okay? Most people have got to understand the metric system as it applies to gold. There's 35,274 ounces in a metric ton. So just doing the math, and I thought this is interesting. You know, when you're talking about 1,000 metric tons, you're talking 42,328,800,000. When you start talking 30, now here's what's going to be mind-blowing. When you're talking 30,000 tons, it's about 1,270,864,000. Okay, people say, well, what are you doing dazzling with the numbers? I want to show something to everyone. The Chinese, if they have 30,000, and again, they consider it a top secret, but as I said, it can be pretty much deduced. If you see the price of gold rising 3, 4, 5 times, well, then you're talking that the Chinese have no longer 1.2 trillion. They've got 6 trillion. So they can use that 6 trillion and whatever else to basically say our renminbi, or the yuan, that goes by both names, is now backed by X percentage of commodities. People will flock to that. And all China has to do, and I believe they're going to do this, both China and or Russia, either individually or together, are going to call the United States' bluff. And when they do that, if they do it on a Friday, it's over by Monday. Because, again, they'll be hemming and hawing. But the point being, if China and Russia open up their gold to say, look, we invite the press of the world to come. Here is our however many ounces of gold, Richard. That's going to basically send shockwaves through the system. And that's
we're coming up on a break, Stephen. But when we come back, I want to ask you, why would we'll start the conversation now and continue after the break. But why would China? Why would Japan say, well, we're not buying any, not only are we not buying any more U.S. Treasury notes or bills or buying any more U.S. debt, we're going to start selling it. We want to divest ourselves of it. Wouldn't they, because they are so heavily invested in the United States, China owning huge swaths of real estate and agricultural land and so forth, wouldn't they be shooting themselves in the foot if they were to do that, pull that string? We'll find out when we come back with Steve Quayle. Brooke Benton and Dinah Washington take us into the break with That's a Rockin' Good Way, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Stay with us. And the wonderful Patti LaBelle with Lady Marmalade. Well, I say marmalade, she says marmalade. Let's call the whole thing off. Let's not. No, let's keep talking. I have set up a hashtag Richard C2CAM. Richard C2C, as in Coast to Coast, AM. And here's what you're saying. This comes from at Mojo Daily, Mojo All Day. There's a theory that the Mayans and Aztec temples were used as a giant sluice to get gold from diverting rivers via aqueducts. Here's another one. I believe soon they're going to mine for gold on meteors and comets within our reach because of gold fever. And then at Jen Schmidt 1, referring to our previous hour with John Lofty Wiseman talking about survival. Thanks for the survival tips. And on behalf of those 40 and under, I can fix and rig most anything. I worked with youth in my city 13 who fix anything. All right. And then finally, from at Mind Century, running another show about gold fears. Mind Cemetery not particularly impressed. Not a gold bug, I'm guessing. That's all right. We'll discuss further about gold, who's manipulating the price of gold, and why, and is there any gold left in Fort Knox? And if not, does it matter? Back with more of my conversation with author-researcher Steve Quayle right here on Coast to Coast. Thanks for hanging out. Welcome back to Coast AM. Richard Syrett with you. And, there are those who posit we, the West, are already at war with Russia and China. Now, we're not fighting wars in the traditional methods with tanks and missiles. This all happens sort of backstage in the global theater, and occasionally it spills out onto the main stage. But now wars are being fought by attacking economies and currency wars, attacking a country's a currency and so forth. And it's what we're really talking about is the battle for world hegemony. And I guess the way one achieves world hegemony is to attain world reserve currency status, and that's been held by the United States since, roughly around just after the Second World War, taking over from the sterling pound. But my question to you, Steve Quayle, is why would China, so heavily invested in the United States, want to bring the United States down? Wouldn't they be shooting themselves in the foot?
Well, let's define bringing the United States down. Under the Clinton administration, China demanded and has demanded all the way forward, just good business, the right for eminent domain to enforce their commercial holdings in this country. And they own, right now, I believe, 75% of the commercial real estate in New York. They own around the world, not just the United States. They're buying up commodity-producing assets. They're buying up the top real estate. So understand that. Here's what I think most people who, tune off or just, I don't want to hear about gold, they don't get it. Here's what the bottom line is, and we'll work backwards. The United States is broke, okay? Broke. You cannot have the gross domestic product that we have on a yearly basis and OWE $1.5 quadrillion. And you know this as well as I do, Richard, when you can't pay, when your liabilities exceed your assets. So what China has, and I'd say this is brilliant, what they have done is they have taken out all of the assets. In other words, they turn around and take those $2 trillion and they buy stuff, whether it's real estate, whether it's farms, whether it's goods, whether it's meat, you name it. Whatever they buy, machinery, steel, whatever they buy, steel, closed down steel manufacturing plants. If you look at Detroit and contrast it to Shanghai, you've got to basically take a big gulp. If you look at Detroit or any of the inner cities in America that are falling apart, and then you look at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, you'd think that we're on a different planet. By the way, just Google that go on an internet search and check it out. The point is, here's the bottom line. The United States is broke, and in the game of chess, they are going, they meaning Russia or China. Now, what have we done? We've just declared war on Russia economically by a joint venture with the Saudis to lower the price of oil. Well,
yeah, we're feeling that up here big time with our tar sands.
Yeah, we're going to do that. So what people don't understand is whether they like gold or not, the people that end up with it rule the world. For instance, this is amazing. There's some cool stuff I want to share just because you're looking at India. India has, second most populated country in the world. People in India spend 50 times more on gold jewelry than Americans. And in India, and in China, and in Japan, and in the United Arab Emirates, and in South America, it always is synonymous with wealth and provision. Obviously, being in the business for all the years I've been at, 30 years, the point being is that people don't get it. They say, well, you can't eat gold. Okay, I can go to Buenos Aires if I wanted to, or any place in South America, and probably easily eat 2 meals a day, steak, all the fixins, as they say, and I could do that pretty close to, let's say, 5 months. So the point is that when people say you can't eat it, people who have fled tyranny, people who fled out of Rome as it was crashing, or Vietnam, or the people that fled out of Europe under Hitler's rise to destruction. The point is they all had to have something that's tangible and universally accepted as well. The Swiss are the ones that invented the statement, he who buys gold never starves. Now let's contrast that with the Americans. What is it? 48 and 49 million people on food stamps, 98 million people unemployed. On my website, richardstevequayle.com, I basically am keeping track. People are notifying me from different places around the United States that there's a shortage of eggs, a shortage of meat, prices going up, portions going down. So the point is that going back to the question, what good is gold? It's the foundation for barter and trade amongst, and I will say this, amongst people that want equal measures. It's a biblical principle that want just measures. When you go to fill up in the United States your gallon of gas, you want a gallon of gas. You don't want half a gallon. And you guys in Canada, do you buy by the liter or by the gallon?
We buy by the liter.
Okay. So the point is that you don't want to get, how should I say this tactfully? You don't want to be taken advantage of by thinking you're getting one thing and you're really getting another. This is why, again, here is the bottom line. Here is the total bottom line. We as a nation now have sold our birthright. The United States and Canada too, if you understand how many cross-collateralized positions there are and how many claims on every underlying asset. You remember the mortgage crisis? People couldn't even tell who owned their mortgage. And even the whole registration system with the mortgage registration system was flawed and found to be crooked. So the point being is the reason why gold is critical at this time frame and silver, it is the only medium of exchange that's universally accepted worldwide and has a value in excess of how many American dollars. In other words, you can go to Switzerland, that it'll be valued in the Swiss franc. Go to Russia, it's valued in rubles. The point is that it is beyond the manipulative power of the central banks. And I'll just say it one more time. Rape, pillage, and plunder, the United States that used to be has gone under. Now people say, I still got my job. You do, but 98 million people don't. And this is the thing. I always, after doing Coast to Coast with George, or even tonight, people say, well, I don't see any. I'm not hurt in my part of the country. When the rich outnumber the poor, and when I'm talking about the stuff that just makes everybody shake their heads when, the 500 richest people in the United States own more than, 90% of everybody else? That does not set well. That's the basis of revolution. And this is what, with all the other problems we have, that we've got an issue now where people simply don't believe, the world does not believe the United States is as good as gold. Remember, the U.S. dollar used to be as good as gold? Everybody in the world. I remember traveling Europe in 1962. I can remember a $100 bill. It was a wow factor. I can remember a Eurail pass, I think, in 1962, for all of Europe for 90 days was $295. Well, that doesn't happen any longer. So the point I'm trying to make is this. We see the rest of the world saying we attribute value to gold, but guess what? The United States is the country that's the most indebted, has the highest percentage of people in prisons, has the highest percentage of people on welfare, government welfare. We're seeing riots now all through the country, different reasons. We're seeing people turning against people. We're seeing our open borders, and as Michael Savage says, borders, language, culture, we're seeing all that pillaged and plundered. And now we're seeing something very, very unique. The rest of the world says we don't want to take the American dollar anymore. And and this is the hardest thing I have to articulate it. If you basically thought that you had, let's say, $200,000 in your 401k or whatever, and that's what you're going to retire on, and all of a sudden through a cyber attack or legislation, it's no longer there, what is your hope for the future? The point is that people, and there are real people out there, call them the globalists, call them the Illuminati, they're both the same thing, interchangeable, that will not be happy with what they've got until they have everybody's what they once had.
You mentioned, Stephen, that gold is sort of beyond the manipulation. But if we look at the price of paper gold, and I want you to explain the difference between the paper market and the physical market, it's about $1,222 last time I checked.
Yep.
Despite the fact that we have a world in turmoil. We go back to, earlier last year when the Crimean situation was about to explode. Echoes of World War I. We had rampaging jihadists lopping off heads throughout the Middle East. We had Ebola, and yet, we're generally, when geopolitics sort of erupts, we see a spike in the price of gold. Gold has remained flat for the last 5 years, despite all of this turmoil. To me, that's manipulation.
Total manipulation. Now, remember, in U.S. dollars, that's the case because the price of gold in the different countries, whether it's China or India, is much higher than it is in the United States. Now, let's talk about exchange-traded funds. ETF or paper gold trades, but there is no gold backing up, as you just said. Richard, there's so many more, hundreds and even thousands more times gold trades. Same thing with silver. So what has been a neat deal for the federal government and the big banks is that they can sell gold short that they do not own and make up the difference with Fed printed dollars. Well, the Shanghai gold market is not going to allow naked shorts. A naked short, you don't have what you're selling. The point is, it's like a cattleman trying to sell 1,000 head of cattle into the futures market. He doesn't have it. Everybody else who has the cows sees the price of their cows going down, and the point being is, then he just makes the difference up with cash that he prints. Well,
so for every 1 ounce of actual physical gold that's extant, there may be 100 people running around with a piece of paper saying, "I own that piece, that 1 ounce."
Yeah, and it's more like 1,000. Okay. So the point is, it's just like in the let's say the silver market, at the COMEX, where if they have 300 million ounces of silver, there can be multiple billion ounces on paper. So why are they manipulating the price of gold? Because by keeping the price of gold down, they keep the people, in the market. And the Dow Jones is like the magician's hand. The Dow Jones is 90% of the trading. Actually, I think it's 95% of trading now is HFT, high frequency trading, computer algorithms. The average guy cannot click his screen fast enough. And when you've got proprietary trading programs that see both sides of the trade, you can't play against the house, especially if they're stacking against you. The only way to come out is to get out of that game and go into an honest game. Can I be blunt? Gold and silver, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, that's honest money. Paper money is basically liar's paper. Yet when the rest of the world says, you guys are a bunch of liars, we won't take your paper, well, that's a war scenario. And that's why we're building up to World War III. You look at how the intensity, since we started in Ukraine, and the whole story about that was a total provocation. I mean, come on, you've got President Putin telling the American citizens, don't give up your guns. You've got, and this is a critical point, because that's the last thing we've got standing against, us and tyranny. Well, now you've got a government that's basically vilifying and calling veterans, gun owners, homeschoolers, Christians, constitutionalists, anybody that quotes the Declaration of Independence as a terrorist. And the list goes on, and I'll make it easy for everybody. If you are just an American citizen and you don't work for the company's store, you're a terrorist. Some way, some form, they've got you covered. So now let's get back to gold. Okay, gold has basically been the thing that the middle class was able to, how should I say this, to grow on. The middle class in America is dead. All you have to do, and you've seen it too, Richard, haven't you seen just how little savings there is in America now?
Well, I follow Williams at Shadow Stats, and I see that the household income has not budged since 1970. That's 45 years ago. That tells the whole story as far as I'm concerned. Yeah,
but see, what that means. The problem is articulating it. Here's what I think it boils down to, and being at this, for 3 decades, most people don't want to take personal responsibility or accountability for their decisions, especially when it comes to investments, okay? And the point being is, who would have ever thought that people, and I literally know people, that would put $1 million into the bank and then pay the bank to take, a percentage of their money. And if that bank were to go under, they'd lose their $1 million. I mean, negative interest rates are real. We just ran through the situation that happened in Iceland. We ran through the situation touched on it briefly, Cyprus. Those people did not expect that. And now we see, what do we see in Venezuela, where their currency was also inflating at horrific rates? We see people standing in line to get the basics of food and detergent. And we see lines that go for miles to a single, supermarket. So the point being is this, that because of an inflated currency, and since you read shadow stats, in the United States they call them leading economic indicators. I call them lying economic indicators, because they never consider the most important thing that the households are faced with. And food is one of the most important things. Hey, we all got to eat or we die, and yet they never put it in there. Same thing with fuel. And now we've got a situation where, just to put it into perspective, by 2022, China's middle class will be 630 million people, while the United States middle class is toast. Most people would be, I would say this, astonished and flabbergasted if they knew that our national parks, our national treasures, our top secret defense, trillion-dollar development programs were all given over to the Chinese as collateral, because the Chinese would smile and buy our debt and then take that debt and turn around and buy our stuff. They're very, very smart. They've had 26 dynasties since 2000 BC to acquire gold. And again, people can argue, they can get emotional about it, but they have nothing in the bank if they're holding paper, except basically what? They have electrons on a screen, and they have a paper printout possibly, but when it crashes, what do they have? And again, I go back to the statement, if you can't hold it, you don't own it. The Indians from India know point blank that they wear their wealth. They know what it's like to live with nothing, and as their middle class increases, they want tangible. The same thing with the Chinese. So here you've got, the United States with 1% of our population, let's say that's 3 million people invest in the metals, against pretty close to probably 2.5, 2.6 billion people, and every single person in that 2.6 billion equation is being told by their government to buy the metals. It causes countries to boom. Its absence causes countries to fall.
All right, Steve, we're coming up on a break here, and maybe I know I am, in fact, guilty of normalcy bias to a certain extent. Part of me just thinks that the U.S. can just continue to paper over this problem and kick this can down the road, maybe for another generation. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out when my conversation with Steve Quayle continues. Here on Coast to Coast AM, my name is Richard Serra. Don't go away.
Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.